Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Grants for Organizations on-year application information session. We're going to get started in just a moment here. We're just going to get a couple more people into the room before we kick things off. Oops, did something just happen to my screen? I think it did. All right, well, it is 3:01 and we have a lot of information to cover today. So we're going to go ahead and jump into today's presentation. Thanks so much for being here with us. My name is Laura Weiss. I am a program director here with the Maryland State Arts Council, and I'm joined by my co-program director, Emily Sollenberger. And we are here today to talk about the FY24 on-year application process for the Grants for Organizations program. Couple of housekeeping things. I think most of you are familiar with Zoom, but just a couple of buttons to point out. Please do make sure that you are muted throughout today's session, just so that we can avoid any kind of background noise. Of course, we will have a Q&A section at the end, so you can feel free to unmute yourself at that point. You can feel free to be on or off camera, however you are comfortable. There is the chat in kind of the middle of the screen. Emily is keeping an eye on that right now. We'll be putting some information and links in there throughout, and you can also feel free to utilize that to ask questions or to post any comments as well. There is the raise hand function in your little reaction section. You can feel free to use that if you have a question during the question and answer time. And there should also be the ability to turn on closed captioning if you would like. We're going to start today with a couple of grounding slides. Our first slide is our equity and justice statement. And that is that the arts celebrate our state's diversity, connect our shared humanity, and transform individuals and communities. The Maryland State Arts Council and its supporting collaborators are committed to advancing and modeling equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion in all aspects of our organizations and across communities of our state. MSAC and its grantees are committed to embracing equity and non-discrimination regardless of race, religious creed, color, age, gender expression, sexual orientation, class, language, and/or ability. The next statement is our land acknowledgement statement. This was developed somewhat recently in consultation with many tribal elders and was led by our colleague, Brian Coons. And there's lots of information on our website about land acknowledgement statements. We acknowledge the lands and waters now known as Maryland are the home of its first peoples, the Accohonic Indian Tribe, Assateague Peoples Tribe, Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, Chopticot Band of Indians, Lenape Tribe, Nanticoke Tribe, Nassau-Wawash Band of Indians, Piscataway Conoy Tribe, Piscataway Indian Nation, Pocomoke Indian Nation, Susquehannock Indians, Youghiogheny River Band of Shawnee, and tribes in the Chesapeake watershed who have seemingly vanished since the coming of colonialism. We acknowledge that this land is now home to other tribal peoples living here in diaspora. We acknowledge the forced removal of many from the lands and waterways that nurtured them as kin. We acknowledge the degradation that continues to be wrought on the land and waters in pursuit of resources. We acknowledge the right of the land and waterways to heal so that they can continue to provide food and medicine for all. We acknowledge that it is our collective obligation to pursue policies and practices that respect the land and waters so that our reciprocal relationship with them can be fully restored. The vision of the Maryland State Arts Council is to play an essential role ensuring every person has access to the transformative power of the arts. And we do that through our mission, which is to advance the arts in our state by providing leadership that champions creative expression, diverse programming, equitable access, lifelong learning, and the arts as a celebrated contributor to the quality of life for all of the people of Maryland. The Maryland State Arts Council is currently operating under a strategic plan that was adopted in 2019, and actually we're going to be going into a new strategic planning process shortly. But currently we are operating under 5 goals, and those goals are to increase participation, provide intentional support, build capacity, leverage connections, and bolster Maryland arts. And today's information session is really honing in on that goal 2, which is to provide intentional support. During all of our public meetings, we like to invite everyone to embrace these creative meeting actions. That is to celebrate being in the space with other creative people, engage with everyone's presence as a gift, acknowledge that together we know a lot, enter the conversation with curiosity and inquiry, share your idea and trust that it will be heard, use I statements, focus your language on the task at hand, hold one another accountable with care. Apply yes and, I hear your idea and I'm going to add to it. And balance speaking and listening. This is just a reminder of all of the very many different kinds of professional development opportunities that the Maryland State Arts Council offers. You can go to our Eventbrite page to find all of the different things that are currently happening or coming up in the next couple of months. A couple of things to point out: we do have Coffee with the Council is back now in the fall. Those are happening every other Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. Those are virtual events. We'd love to see you join us for some of those. And currently we are also holding, this says regional art summits, but they are, we're doing them as regional office hours throughout this fall. So yesterday, for example, I was in Western Maryland and got to visit some of our organizations and artists. We were out at the Allegheny Arts Council. We're doing that throughout the fall. We're going to different regions to hold those office hours. So we would love to see you at those. Come stop by, say hello. We'll talk about applications and any questions that you have. But you can find all of the upcoming events on our Eventbrite page. And the final kind of advertisement here is just a reminder to consider joining us to be a panelist. Actually, we have a call right now open for the Grants for Organizations panel. We are looking for panelists to join us to evaluate the GFO applications. And I know you're thinking, I'm in an on year, how can I possibly be a panelist? You can be a panelist. It is possible. You would just recuse yourself from any applications that you are associated with. We would love to have you be a part of that panel process. You can find the public call on our website. You would work very closely with myself and with Emily to go through that entire panel process. You would attend the panel meetings, and most importantly to note, it is paid work. So there is a stipend involved with the work as a panelist. All right, so here we are at today's agenda. We are here to talk about the on-year application. So today we're going to review the GFO program as a whole. Then we're going to get into some details about the GFO timeline and the next steps that you can expect through the deadline and then through the entire process, really. So we're looking all the way to next summer. We're going to walk through the application itself and the associated rubric. We'll talk about the funding formula. There are funding formula changes for FY24, so we'll go through that. We'll just briefly hit on Smart Simple. I think most of you are probably pretty familiar with it at this point, but we'll go through that as well. And then we will, of course, hold time for questions at the end. And just a note that we are really focusing today on just the on-year application. So if you're in an off year or if you're not in the GFO program, we're really focusing today just on that on-year application. And we're happy to talk about off year or other questions at a different time. All right, Emily, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Laura. And so good to see so many faces today. I also just wanted to note, as Laura was speaking, if you hadn't seen in the chat box that I dropped quite a few links in there. So just grab those if you found that you want to dig into any more information about what Laura had just talked about. But we're going to go through starting kind of as a broad overview of what the Grants for Organizations program is. The purpose of this program is to provide operating support that strengthens and sustains Maryland's art infrastructure. So that's really getting general operating support out to our organizations across the state. As a reference point in FY23, we awarded nearly $17 million in GFO funding to 283 organizations across the state. And we just went through our intent to apply to get a good idea of new organizations coming in, and I see a couple of those faces here today, but we're looking to accept maybe another 20 to 24-ish into the program, seeing how things work out, but we'll be over 300, I think, this year, which is really exciting to provide that amount of support across the state. At the top, we're going to remind you about this a couple times throughout today's presentation, but you are in an on-year. That means you are going to complete a full application by November 15th. By 11:59 p.m. That is when our cutoff is in Smart Simple. There will not be any technical assistance outside of those, our regular office hours, which for Laura and I tend to be 8 to 4, and many of our staff work those hours. So anything outside of those hours, we probably would not be able to assist with. So just know that as you are moving forward in your planning. Okay, so who can apply for a GFO award? So if you are a returning applicant, and many of you are here today, you've already been accepted into the GFO program. So kind of once you're in the program, you continue to reapply, but you don't need to essentially go through the eligibility checks again. So you've already been notified that you've been on an on-year by discipline cycle or other circumstances that would require you to be in an on-year. If you're a new applicant, you would need to submit an intent to apply. We've already gone through that process because that was due on September 15th, and that's the same date every year. So if you're not in the program and you're here today listening, that next intent to apply will be due on September 15th of next year for next year's funding cycle. If you are a new organization that did not submit an intent to apply, or it wasn't approved for some reason, you will not be able to submit that full application for FY24. But if that's the case, do be in touch with Laura and I, because there's another program that would definitely suit you for this current year. Okay. So we talk a lot about the on-year cycle and an off-year cycle. That is because with the GFO program, there is it's a 3-year cycle. So every 3 years, you complete what we call an on-year application or a full application, which includes a review by panel, which determines a panel score, which then helps to determine your funding. So every 3 years, an on-year. In between those on-years, you will submit what we call an off-year application, which is much shorter, and you do not go through a panel process. And we'll get into those details a little bit more. But as you'll see for FY24, those that are in on-year would be our theater organizations, service, folk and traditional, and then multidiscipline B. Additionally, if you're new to the program, you would also be in an on-year this year, and then you would fall into your discipline cycle. Okay, and I think I just said this, but just to reiterate, the new organizations will complete an on-year process. So the full review process is more than just the written application. So we have a panel of folks that review each group of organizations by discipline. So those panelists will review and score on their own time and come up with an initial score for the organization, and we pull those together to get a comprehensive score. Once they go through their first initial review period, they will then be assigned to your organization. 2 panels will be assigned to your organization for 2 different types of extension assignments. So one will be in contact about an artistic activity visit, and one will be in contact to get an in-depth conversation. So 2 different panelists assigned to one organization. And there will be more information about this too as we move forward. Once that is complete, we then score the financials. The State Arts Council staff does that. Laura and I review the financial information, and then that culminates in a panel meeting where the panel takes all the information provided from their initial review, their extension assignments, and any additional information. There we go. Sorry about that. To then come up with a final score at that panel meeting. Okay, so a little bit more about the extension assignments. Panelists will be assigned to complete extension assignments for each organization. So again, one artistic activity visit and one in-depth conversation, 2 panelists. And it's up to the panelists and the organization to schedule these events and conversations. So a panelist will be reaching out to you in early February to schedule these assignments, and we can always help to facilitate those connections, but we do ask that the panelists and your organization representative do schedule these so it makes sense for both of your schedules. Okay, so what is an artistic activity visit? So this is really looking at providing evidence in comparison to the written application. So within your application, you'll be providing additional details about all of your artistic activities. So what the panelist does is they are coming to experience any type of activity that is your mission-based work. So that experience can be attending a performance, an exhibition, any type of event. It can be a meeting with staff to talk through photos, videos, different information, data from within the past 2 years that connect to your artistic experience or activity. It could be a meeting where the organization shares their website, social media, and have a collaborative kind of exploratory experience to go through your artistic programming and activities. And it could also be a meeting with your artists associated with the organization or artistic staff in any kind of way. So ideally what is happening is that your panelists is experience the artistic activities from your organization. And this happens in February into March. So we'll provide some more information as we get closer to that time period. So if you're an organization that might be dormant during that time or might not have some activities at that time, you know, a meeting to go through that archival information would probably be best for you. But as you're kind of thinking through the timeline and making your plans ahead, just think about what activities that your panelists might want to come to. Okay, and then the second panelist will be conducting an in-depth conversation. So this is really a time for clarification of the written application by the panelists asking the organization questions and engaging in conversation that surrounds just kind of garnering further information about something that is either missing from the application that there's questions about, and that's always going to be in alignment with the review criteria. This meeting can take place in person or could also take place virtually through Zoom, Google Meet, or by the good old-fashioned telephone. But again, similar to the artistic activity visit, it's up to the organization to schedule with the panelists, and it's also up to the organization to decide who is a part of that conversation. A lot of times it's an executive or managing director, your board president, artistic director, an artist. It could be anybody that you think would best represent your organization and be able to speak to activities and what's included in your application for further clarification. Okay, so here's kind of the general timeline that kind of puts everything together, what I just covered here. So in October, November, we're here. We're The application for the on-year is open in Smart Simple, so you can access it now. For those new organizations who completed and were approved for an intent to apply that are new this year for FY24, your draft application is already in Smart Simple. You don't need to open that. It's in your in progress folder. So you can just open that up and start plugging away. For those of you that are in an on-year buy cycle, you can go into Smart Simple and open up your full application. And again, that online or that on-year application will be due November 15th by the end of the day. Then moving forward in December or January, our panelists will be assigned to your application and they will provide that initial review and scoring independently online. And then the MSAC staff will be reviewing the application and reviewing financials. February through March 15th is generally the time where those extension assignments will take place, that artistic activity visit and in-depth conversation. So we look at around March 15th to get those completed. Then in late March and early April, we move into the panel meetings. There will be a panel meeting or two. I think theater, we're going to look at 2 panel meetings. So it'll be by discipline. So there'll be your 2 theater panel meetings, service, folk and traditions, multidiscipline B, and then we'll have multidiscipline panels for our new organizations coming in. Then in May and June, we'll make those recommendations for funding based on our budget. And then in July, we have to wait till after July 1st, the very start of FY24, before we send notifications of those grants through Smart Simple. And then upon request through July and August over the summer, Laura and I can pull feedback for our on-years and provide any additional recommendations that the panel has provided through their process. And then ongoing, we are available to answer questions, provide support, meet with your staff, your board, attend programs and events. We really want to be engaged with what you're doing throughout the year, and we're here to support you in all those steps. And then finally, we've got some dates here for interim reports and final reports. Every year, the interim report is due on January 31st, and our final reports are due August 15th. So if you did not receive FY23 funding and you're going into FY24 for the first time, you do not need to worry about these FY23 dates, but know moving forward that these will be required moving forward. Okay, I just talked for a long time. I'm going to pass it back over to Laura to start digging into the application.
Great, thanks, Emily. So the application itself, we're going to walk through. There are 4 different sections of the application. We're going to go through all of the questions and the corresponding rubrics and make sure that we answer any questions about them. But the application itself, it includes your contact and your organizational information, which is pulled directly from your Smart Simple organizational profile. One thing to note is you probably are aware that there has been a change. This is a federal change going from what used to be the DUNS number to the new system, which is called the UEI, the Unique Entity Identifier. We have to have this information. So this is something that if your organization doesn't have this yet, you need to go through that process of making sure that you get the UEI. This is a federal requirement, so we need to have that to be able to include in your application. There is a section in your organizational profile in Smart Simple that asks for that. It's a new field, so you would enter in that information into your organizational profile, and that will then pull into any subsequent applications from there. If you have any questions about UEIs, if you don't know how to obtain that, Emily and I can provide you some step-by-step instructions about how to get that through sam.gov. But do make sure that if you haven't done that, that is at the top of your priority list. In addition, there's going to be those narratives in 4 different sections. There's also financials that are required. There are a few attachments that we'll go through. And then finally, there is an authorization signature at the very end. we're going to walk through all of this now, all of the application, but know that the full guidelines along with the narrative and the rubric itself are posted as a Word doc on our website, so you can reference that at any time. All right, jumping in here. So section A of the application, it has to do with addressing why the work of your organization is important. So the first question is, what are the vision, mission, goals, and or values of the organization? And you'll see after the question in parentheses and italics, you're going to see what the excellent to outstanding response is per the rubric. So this is the highest of the scoring. So if you were to answer this with an excellent to outstanding response, it would include clear, specific, and thorough evidence of vision, mission, goals, and or values. The second question is, how have the vision, mission, goals, and or values of the organization evolved over the past 2 years? And the excellent to outstanding response for that is to have clear, specific, and thorough explanation of growth and or slash evolution over the past 2 years. And for both of these, there'll be a narrative field that you'll just be able to enter in the information into. The next question are 2 questions that actually are not scored. These are going to help inform some of the other questions and narratives throughout the application. The first is, what is the geographic area of service for your organization? So this is asking for specific communities, counties, cities, the entire state, identifying what that geographic area of service is for your organization. And again, that's not scored. This is a response that is helping to guide the understanding of other pieces throughout the application. The next question, 3B, is within your geographic area of service, identify the percentage of programming serving the public other than tuition paying constituents, which would include free activities along with activities that are open to the public that may be free and or paid opportunities. Tuition paying includes programming with a fee for service model, such as classes, camps, workshops, etc., that are intended for a specific group of people and not open to the public. Emily and I frequently get questions about this one. So just to kind of break it down a little bit more. So this is really looking at how is your, what is the amount of programming that your organization produces that is reaching the public as a whole? So an example of an activity that would not be open to the public would be something that is specifically tuition based. So if your organization had a series of classes that was only intended for elementary school students, they paid a fee, it was only for those students and only them and their family had any kind of interaction with it. There was no interaction with the public other than that. That would be an example of something that is not open to the public. It is tuition based. It's for a tuition paying constituent. So that's what we're looking for here. We're looking for how the activities that are reaching to the public as a whole. They can be free, they can be paid. It doesn't have to be free, but those are some examples. We get that question a lot, so we just want to make sure that is clear. And we're happy to talk through any questions that you might have about it. The final section of section A is the chart. You've probably heard a lot about the chart, or you remember the chart from previous applications. But this chart is explaining how your statements from A1, A2, and A3 are demonstrated in your activities. So this is going to be outlining a list of all of the events or arts activities that are happening in FY24. So that is July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. And you'll see that there are different sections to address for each activity. So you're going to be looking at how does each activity connect to the vision, mission, goals, and values of the organization? How does the activity or describe the public value, meaning the importance or the relevance of the activity for the constituents in the geographic area of service? How is each arts activity designed to reach yet to be known constituents in the geographic area of service? And finally, if the arts activity is tuition-based, how does the activity reach beyond the tuition paying constituents? So if you do have those camps or classes or workshops that we talked about in the previous one, how is that activity reaching beyond those that are paying for it? If the activity is not tuition-based, you can simply put NA in that last section. We also frequently get questions about the level of detail within this chart. So we are looking for kind of the buckets, if you will, of your activities. So if you're a theater, for example, we're not looking for each individual play that you're going to be doing within the season. What we're looking for more is by the program type. So you might have your main stage season and then your secondary stage, or your classes and workshops, your matinee series, whatever that might be. It's putting those into buckets so that we're looking at the program type as a whole, as opposed to each individual play that you're doing for the year. We also often are asked, is there a maximum amount of activities? The chart does, it has a maximum amount of 20 rows. So 20 activities is the top. I don't think we've ever seen 20 activities listed though. So but that is the maximum amount. All right, Emily, I will pass it over to you for section B.
Great, thanks, Laura. I know that activities chart, we get lots of questions. So we're also able to chat with you one-on-one if there's any questions that have come up. I know I mentioned that in the chat a couple of times too. If there's specifics just to your organization, we can chat further in more detail. So the narrative section B is really around how your organization designs its programs. So there's two questions within this particular section. The first one is to describe the creative process within your organization's programming. And we ask that you include a description of how artistic decisions are made, which is the creative process, and how the constituents of your geographic area are involved in the programmatic development and evaluation of the resulting artistic activities. So you'll notice that the geographic area of service is mentioned in this particular question. So when you're answering the question that's not scored in section A about your geographic area of service, the panelists can go back to that question and get the information to help inform your answer here to section B, question number 1. So an excellent to outstanding score would explain clearly, or the explanation clearly illustrates the creative process. So thinking about the very start and the ideation of the creative process, all the way through the execution of whatever those activities are. So that would include the creative roles, responsibilities, and authentic constituent collaboration, where constituents are an essential part of the artistic decision-making process. So it's kind of two pieces here, thinking about the creative process and also how constituents are involved in that process. Question number 2 is explain the process for long-term or strategic planning. And if your organization does not have a long-term or strategic plan, how do you design programs and activities for the future, or any steps towards a more formalized process of strategic planning or long-term planning? So how does this process align with your vision, mission, goals, and values? Again, going back to part A where you answered that question as well. So an excellent to outstanding response would include a clear and specific explanation of long-term or strategic planning process that directly connects with the vision, mission, goals, and values of your organization. So here we're really thinking about all those pieces that make up the planning process. So not just the finalized strategic plan itself, but who's involved, what are the steps that you take for your planning. Okay, and I'll take section C too, Laura, just because A was a big one. So section C is addressing how your organization operates. So the first one is really actually an attachment. So for C1, we're looking for, in the attachment section of the application, to include a graphic or a chart of your organization's staffing and board structure. So that can include your board, your staff, artists, volunteers, anybody that's involved with the structure of your organization and how it operates. So an excellent to outstanding response would include a clear and specific explanation of your organization's staffing and board structure. And again, what we're looking for here is not necessarily a description, but a graphic or a chart that shows the structure of your organization. The second question here is, how is your staffing and board structure currently successful? So again, thinking about your board, staff, artists, volunteers, all those folks that are in your chart, how do you determine that it's successful? So an excellent to outstanding response would include clear and specific explanation of indicators of a successful staff and board. And then the third question here is, what staffing and board and or financial challenges affect the operation of your organization? And then how are those challenges routinely identified and addressed? So kind of two pieces here as well, but an excellent to outstanding response would include clear and specific commitment to regularly identifying and addressing staffing, board, and or financial challenges. So here we're looking at, how do you identify those challenges, and then how are they addressed? Kind of two pieces. And also note here, it's okay to list that your organization has challenges. We all know that there are things that come up for organizations at every different level, and it's important to know that you can identify them and that they're addressed. So it's okay to be very candid in this particular question. We know they're out there, and it also helps us provide additional support to you in the long run. Okay, and then two more for section C. C4 is, what procedures are in place for monitoring and approving the organization's finances? So in your response, we're looking for details of how the organization's develop and approve your annual budget, including your regular operating expenses. So an excellent to outstanding response includes a detailed procedure for developing, monitoring, and approving finances. And then the fifth question in C is based on your demographics. And there's a link here that you can access the demographics in your area. How does your staffing reflect the population of your geographic area of service? So we ask that you consider here specific demographic information for your geographic area of service as evidence, and include what strategies are in place to consider further diversifying your staff, board, artists, your organizational structure in the future. So an excellent to outstanding response here would be that the organization, staff, and board clearly reflect the constituency of your geographic area of service and have strategies in place to further diversify staff and board in the future. Okay, Laura, I'm going to pass it back to you for section D.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Section D is the last of the 4 narrative sections, and this is focusing on addressing how your organization evaluates what it does. There are 3 questions here for this section. The first is, what is the sensory or emotional experience hoped to be achieved through your organization's arts programming? The excellent to outstanding responses include programming process directly considers intended sensory and emotional impact. The second question is looking at how do programmed arts activities assume risk by considering non-dominant norms, values, narratives, standards, or aesthetics. And the excellent to outstanding response here is that programming process indicates regular consideration of non-dominant norms, values, narratives, standards, and aesthetics. And I will just point out that both of these questions, along with many others, are inspired by a document that you might be familiar with called Aesthetic Perspectives. And I don't know if Emily has, she probably doesn't have the link quite there, but she will get it in 30 seconds and drop it in the chat. This is a really fantastic read, and a lot of times we get questions, particularly about the sensory and emotional experience and the non-dominant norms question. I would highly recommend taking a look through this document because it does share a lot about both of these and many other terms and ideas that are used throughout this application. So we'll make sure that there's a link to that. We'll also email that out. From time to time, we usually make sure that we share that throughout this process. So that's a really great reference point, particularly for these questions. The final question here, and this is one that we do really enjoy, is please give one recent example of the organization's greatest successes and explain why it is considered successful. And the excellent to outstanding response here is that evaluation clearly articulates why a specific program or event was determined to be successful. The next couple of slides have to do with the financial statements and the finances that are reported within your application. If you are an organization that operates under $600,000 annually, all that we need from you would be a signed financial statement from your most recently completed fiscal or calendar year. This can just be a simple P&L. You do not need an audit. It can just be that simple profit and loss statement signed by your treasurer or whoever is in charge of your finances. And again, that would be from your most recently completed fiscal or calendar year. If you are an organization that operates over $600,000 annually, then we do need an audit from you. That again would be from your most recently completed fiscal or calendar year. And that does have to be an independent external audit prepared by a CPA firm. There is a kind of a new note here that we have added. This is new for this year. We do know that November 15th, that deadline often coincides with when an audit is kind of being wrapped up from the previous fiscal year. So if you are in the middle of your audit when this deadline is approaching, and you know that the audit is not going to be complete by November 15th, reach out to myself or to Emily before the deadline to discuss sending the updated audit by March 1st, 2023. So we need it, that's the very last moment that we can take it, March 1st, 2023, but we have to know in advance. So if you fall into that camp, be sure to reach out to us. We want to make sure that we're using your most recent financials. So that's the reason that we're giving that kind of grace period for this year. As Emily mentioned back in the timeline, the staff, which means myself and Emily, we go through all of your financials and we score them based on these 3 points. So we're looking at financial information indicates a strong commitment to multiple diverse income streams. We're looking at the organization does not display any significant financial changes. And if there are any significant financial changes, they are supported with programmatic cause in alignment with the organization's mission and vision. And the final one is only for organizations that are over that $600,000 threshold. And that is that the organization is operating with a cash reserve of at least 1 year. The final part of the application is going to be your attachment section. So in that section, you're going to add the graphic that Emily talked about before that's associated with question C1. That's the graphic of the organization's staffing structure. You'll also include your IRS letter of determination. That just says that you are indeed a 501c3, and you will also include a signed W-9 form, and that's so we can hopefully pay you once the grant is approved. This is, you may or may not know this, but Emily and I are always available to offer feedback on applications. We offer this in all of our programs, not just GFO. So we're here to review portions of your application and offer feedback on them before you submit. If you'd like to take us up on this, we're happy to take a read through it. One thing to note is that we are experiencing extremely high volumes of feedback requests across the board right now in all of our programs. So if you would like for us to go through, a certain section or a couple of questions and offer some feedback, reach out to us, allow for up to 15 business days to receive that written feedback sent back to you. We do request that if you would like this for the on-year application, that you reach out to us no later than November 1st. After that, unfortunately, we're just not going to be able to accommodate those requests, but reach out to us before November 1st and we're happy to work through some things with you. And you can reach out to us to discuss availability at any time. All right, we're going to jump into the funding formula here. I'm just going to do a time check. All right, we got 15 minutes to get through. So the funding formula for GFO, we are frequently asked, sometimes organizations will say, I don't know how much to ask for within the application. The GFO program is not an application where you ask for a certain amount of money. It is based on a formula. So that funding formula takes into account a couple of different variables. First, we're going to take into account your total allowable income. That is going to be multiplied by the panel percentage score, which is what you're going through this whole process for. That's what we come to a determination during the panel meeting, whatever that score is for your organization. And then that is multiplied by what we call our cap allocation percentage. And that percentage is determined based on our GFO budget allocation for the year. And new for FY24, it's going to depend on what organizational tier you are in. This is going to be based on your total allowable income level. The cap allocation in the past, that used to be the same percentage for every single organization across the board. And now we are going to be tiering that. So what you see here are the different tiers. So if you are an organization who has an income level between 50,000 and 500,000 per year, you will have one percentage, and then it's going to tier from there. This is a 5-year transition. So we're going from everybody having the same percentage to over 5 years, we're going to get to these goal percentages of 15% is our goal for tier 1, and then working down from there. So this is going to be the first year in FY24 where we see those different percentages that, depending on what your income level is, you're going to have a different cap allocation. You don't need to worry about figuring out any of that. That's on myself and Emily to figure out what those percentages are. We'll be working through that next spring. But again, that's going to be those new tiers. So depending here, you can see the breakdown of where your organization would fall, tier 1 through tier 5. Couple other things about the new equitable funding formula that will be rolled out for FY24. We're also putting grant amount caps will be put into place starting in FY24. So in year 1, which is FY24, that cap amount will be 1.4 million. So there won't be any grants above 1.4 million. And then from there, you can see the that we're scaling down in the next 5 years so that eventually it becomes a $1 million cap. Finally, you can also see kind of the 5-year transition plan in terms of our priorities and how fast or how slow those changes are made. So the tier 1 organizations, which are the smaller organizations, $50,000 to $500,000 in income, the priority is to increase at a faster rate over that 5 years so that we get a higher percentage to you. Tier 2 will steadily increase over 5 years. Tier 3 is going to remain, the goal is to remain stable during that transition. And tiers 4 and 5, they do not decrease at a rate greater than 1.5% annually. So it's a slow decrease. That's a lot of information. We're happy to talk through any of that if you have questions. Emily, you want to walk through Smart Simple?
Sure, and try to go through this quickly so we can have some time for some questions if needed. But Smart Simple is the grant platform that you all are probably pretty familiar with. By now, you either submitted an application or an intent to apply of some sort through this portal. So you will you shouldn't have to register, but if you do, you can do that through going to marylandarts.smartsimple.com. And be sure, again, like Laura mentioned at the top of the presentation, be sure you complete the organizational profile. And this is also where you enter your UEI information. So again, the UEI is the required field replacing the DUNS number. Okay, so here's your home screen. When you get to the login, you can either click that blue register button if you need to get a new account, but most of you should have an account by now, and you would just use your email and your password to log in. When you come to your dashboard, the first kind of layer to that page is My Applications. So you'll see funding opportunities. It'll be a listing of opportunities for you as an organization. You would click on that to get to your new application as an on year. Actually, Laura, can you go back to the other screen real quick? So for those of you that have already started your draft application, or you've submitted an intent to apply for new this year, if you have a draft open, you're actually going to find your draft in progress. Laura's circling that. Thank you. So instead of going back to the funding opportunities to get to your draft, you're going to find it under in progress. So just to avoid duplicate applications there. Okay. So if you're going to open it for the first time and you click into funding opportunities, you'll see that there's actually 3 different grants for organizations that may pop up in your screen. So the first one is the intent to apply. You don't need to worry about that. The second is the grants for organization. You'll see full application. Full application actually translates to on year. That's what you all will want to complete, is your full application. And those that are in an off year, that are completing the short application, will click the off year application. So they're all different. So just be sure to click the full on your application there. And the apply now button is blue. Then once you get to this page, you'll want to click the save draft button towards the bottom. That's going to give you full access to the application itself, and you'll be able to go back to your draft then every time. So you can work on it as much as you like, save, come back until you're ready to submit by that November 15th deadline. And again, also note that our system does not save automatically. So be sure that you are clicking that save draft button as you move through the whole process here. So, and we're here for additional support as you move through the application. Yeah, again, the reminder that it is due on November 15th by 11:59 p.m. Yes, we are here to help. Those are our emails. And you should have heard from or continue to hear from Laura or myself. That means we are your program director. So if you hear from Laura more, contact her, but I can also answer questions and vice versa. Okay, I think that's it. And we've got about 8 minutes here. So are there any questions that we can address for the group here? Michael, I see your questions. Is there a way to download questions so they can be completed offline? Yeah, we tend to have a Word document. I don't know that it's up yet, but the narrative questions that have the rubric built in, is that, I think that's up already. If not, we will add it to the program page. And I see Catherine has her hand up.
Hi, yeah, for the in-depth conversations, are we able to have multiple staff members participate in those, or is it just going to be one representative?
Absolutely, you can have as many people as you'd like join those conversations. So it'll be just the one panelist, but you can have as many folks that represent your organization attend. And it's okay if you don't have the answers right away, or somebody's not available for that particular time slot. You know, you don't have to have all the answers at that one time. You can always go back to the panelists and help answer questions later.
Thanks so much.
Sure. I see Michael's hand. Hi, Michael.
Hey there. Thanks so much for all this information today. I have two questions. First, I'd love to hear, the aesthetic perspectives framework is a really big document. And I'm just curious in terms of the panelists, are they going to be kind of trained up on that as well? Or is it going to be mainly focused on the rubric that comes from that perspectives document? And then briefly, I just wanted to confirm, is there another area in the application to talk about your financial picture and changes based on COVID, other than, say, I know there's kind of the one question about financial challenges, but I don't remember there being a separate section to kind of talk about the nuances of changes the past couple of years. If you could speak to that at all. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Hi, Michael. Good to hear from you. To answer your first question, I think it's a little bit of a yes and situation. So the panelists are they're scoring strictly using the rubric. That is the standard of which they are using to evaluate everything. But we certainly do share the aesthetics perspectives framework with them as kind of a guide, again, so that they're also understanding the terminology and where things are coming from. Yes, the aesthetic perspectives document is a lengthy read. There is a shortened like 7-page version of it that is usually what we also share just as a reference point. So they're kind of working in tandem to understand each other, but it's really the rubric that is being used to score the application. So hopefully that answers that question. And in terms of the financial picture, you're right that there's not a question that is specifically asking for the current financial picture. I think that the one that you identified, the challenges, that one is probably the best place to really be addressing, those things, the challenges, especially as they relate to COVID and the ongoing nature of that's probably the best place to answer that. I'm trying to think if there's anywhere else, Emily, that you would suggest.
Not necessarily, unless it impacts in section A about the significant growth or changes.
Yeah.
That might be another good place. But again, I also piggyback here that the panelists are not scoring your financials. Laura and I are, and we definitely, review your reports and know where you all are individually. And we don't want that, like those big shifts and changes to impact your scoring and the work that is centered around your organization. But if there's specific things that you'd like to include, Michael, or anybody else that are regarding financials, we can also talk about that one-on-one to identify a good place to put that in the application.
Great, thank you.
Sure. I think I saw Angelo's hand next. Hi, Angelo.
How are you? I'm new at this, our organization's a new organization, so we have a lot of questions, but for right now, it's curious. It looks like we are applying for funding that is going to come in between year 23 and 24. Am I correct? Also, so let's say that we get a grant. Is multiple year grant? Is that how it works?
Yeah, great question, Angela. So we operate on the fiscal year. So fiscal year FY24, which you're applying for, will start July 1st of 2023 and end June 30th of 2024. So when you're awarded FY24 funds, the first payment will come as a 75% amount in the fall. So that'd be fall of 23. And then you complete an interim type of mid-year report to update us, see how you're doing. And then the final 25% is then released, which is in the spring of 24. So that's kind of the cycle for how the funding comes out. But then moving forward, Angelo, you would apply every year for the next year's operating support. So that's where that cycle comes in, where every 3 years you would complete this the larger application with the panel review, and in those off years in between, you'd submit a shorter application, which is essentially just section A and financial statements of this. So, and we can talk one-on-one because I know you're new, and we can spend some more time to walk through all this. Great. And then I see Jill's hand too.
Hi, hi, can you hear me? I'm on my phone. So I put the contact person as our treasurer because she is the person who signs the W-9. And if I remember some instructions, it said that that should be the person that's the contact person in order to make payouts easier. But that means that every time there's a communication from through Smart Simple, it goes to her and then she forwards it to me. And I'm just wondering if, if there's a way to change that so that without messing up the payment piece.
Sure, Jill, we can absolutely make changes to the Smart Simple profile. We usually recommend, it's usually whoever is kind of the lead grant writer is usually the contact in Smart Simple, because like you said, any kind of automated reminders or anything like that are going to go to whatever email address is associated with that. So we can certainly make any changes, and it won't mess up your profile or anything like that. And we can help you one-on-one about that.
Okay, so in terms of getting back on and starting working on it, should that happen before I continue working on it?
It can be either way. We'll be able to shift it, and it will not impact the application itself. It will just change how you're logging into the system.
Okay, so should I just send that request to you?
Yeah, that would be great, and we'll make sure that we take care of it.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks.
Sure. And I do, just before we close out, I did see a question, Allie, in the chat about, Allie asked, regarding statewide demographics, can you recommend a resource for sourcing that info? Allie, I think that on the zip code website that we reference, I think that you can pull statewide information. If you can't, then perhaps just the census would be a good source to be able to pull that demographic information. And if you need any help with any of that, let us know, and we can definitely take a look.
Excuse, this is Dana Burton speaking. There's also a database called citydata.com. I think that's what it's, and they have very extensive demographics by county. That might, since we have 23 counties, and you might want to get, it's quite, Maryland's quite varied by county in terms of its demographics, and to take account of it there, it's a good source.
Great. That's another great source, then. Thank you.
Another question. I wasn't sure where the guide to understand sensory and aesthetic impact was coming from. Are you going to email it to me? Or you're going to email an excerpt, or?
Yep, there's a link in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and post it again. Oops, it didn't copy there. I'll go ahead and post it again, but we'll also share it out via email. Oh, it's not copying. Sorry. Having some
yeah, so you'll send the contents of the chat to everyone. Yes?
We won't send the contents of the chat. I just put the link into the chat again. But Dana, we can always send things to you directly in an email too. No big.
Okay.
Yeah, no big deal. Also note that it is 4:03. We are past our time, but I do see 2 more hands. So maybe we can finish up those questions. And again, we're happy to talk one-on-one with you. So I see Jill's hand again, but I want to make sure we hear from, it looks like direct.
I'm Monica.
Hi, Monica.
Hi. So as far as the visits, if I am going to be out of the country at the beginning of March. So can I just schedule those before I leave? Is that fine? Okay. So,
Absolutely. And we can, if you send us those dates, we can always recommend to the panel to make sure that gets scheduled ahead of time, or when they reach out, just let them know your availability right off the bat. So you can get those scheduled.
and
as
that's the
early as
last, you'll need to be in contact with me before. Is that the last part that we're actually, okay.
Yeah, yep. Before the panel
you.
meeting. Yep.
Yeah, there's about a 6-week window to get that complete. So there's a good amount of time.
Great. And I see Jill's hand again. Jill, did you have another question?
No, I just couldn't figure out how to
Oh.
put my hand down on the phone.
Great. Okay, I think I caught everybody in the chat with questions between Laura and I both, and I think we verbally answered everything there. But again, we're here to support you all and make sure you're successful through this entire process. So, send us an email. We can set up some time to chat if needed. And again, as Laura mentioned, if you want feedback on your application, or even just a part of your application that you're unsure about, we can take a look at that a little bit more closely. Okay, Laura, anything else you want to end on?
I think that's it. Thank you all so much for your time. We hope that this kind of gave the overview of what to expect in the months to come. We did record this session, so we will post it on the website in the next couple of days, along with the slide deck, and we will also send that out to you for reference as well. And like Emily said, we're here for you. So however we can help, feel free to reach out. We're always happy to chat. We're happy to email, whatever we can do to help you through the process, just let us know. All right. With that, have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
Good to
Okay.
see you all. Thanks.
Thank you.